Lyndon Johnson beat Barry Goldwater by about 20 points, and the Republican Party had to be repaired at that time. Well, tonight, it appears that the Democrats could lose this presidential election by about the same margin. We have another state now to add to the Reagan total. In the Deep South, the state of Louisiana, a Democratic governor from that state, but the Louisiana, as many of these southern states have been in recent presidential elections, goes Republican. So Louisiana becomes part of the blue wave that we have rolling across the country tonight. Moving farther west now in the southwest, the state of New Mexico, another western state with a Democratic governor, but now a presidential call for Ronald Reagan in the state of New Mexico. It is blue for Ronald Reagan, and the map is beginning to fill in, as you can see. Here's the Electoral College total as we now have it at this hour. Ronald Reagan has passed the 270 required for election according to our analysis and our projection. He has 339. Walter Fritz Mondale, 3 electoral votes, winning the District of Columbia. And the national vote now beginning to add up a little bit. We're over 10% of the precincts reporting nationwide. But the ticket of Reagan and Bush commands a 22-point lead over the ticket of Mondale and Ferraro. And it is worth reminding you that we still have the West to hear from tonight, of course, and that remains President Reagan's strongest political base in this country. California, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, states like that. So that's the national vote and the electoral vote as we have it. Let us show you what is going on in some individual states and the District of Columbia. Nearly all the votes have been counted in the District of Columbia. And Walter Mondale, who owns a home in the district, can take great comfort in the fact that he was the overwhelming winner in the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, 85 to 15%. It was the District of Columbia, of course, that gave George McGovern one of his 2 victories in 1972. In Ohio, look at this. 8% of the precincts in so far, thought to be a battleground state early in the campaign. But Ronald Reagan is blowing away Walter Mondale in one of those Rust Bowl states, a state that had a lot of economic difficulties with factories that closed down or had all kinds of troubles in the steel and the automobile industry. And yet, Ronald Reagan, the conservative Republican at age 73, wins Ohio overwhelmingly. New Jersey, 40% of the precincts in. Again, a big Reagan win in this northeastern industrial state, the heavy ethnic vote. The Mondale-Ferraro ticket thought that with Geraldine Ferraro, a Catholic Italian, they may have a shot in New Jersey, but apparently not. 16 electoral votes there. In Pennsylvania, again a state that the Democrats hoped that they could win because of its strong industrial and union base, but again, Ronald Reagan with an 8-point lead now, 8% of the precincts in, and we are projecting that he will win the state of Pennsylvania. In Connecticut, nearly half of the precincts have reported in that white-collar state, and as you can see, Ronald Reagan has a 22-point lead over the ticket of Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro. So that's where we stand at this time. Part of the electorate that we've been watching very carefully in this election year are the young people, those especially between the ages of 18 and 24. And Ronald Reagan has been running very well among that age group, even though in 1966, when he began his political career, he began it in part by running against the college students of California. Well, according to our analysis of voters today in the state of Texas, 71% of the Texas young people voted for Ronald Reagan. There's a kind of election watch party going on tonight at the University of Texas and the student union there. George Lewis, who's been out of school 1 or 2 years, nonetheless is standing by to give us a report on the mood and what's going on. George?
Well, Tom, you can probably figure out that the noise level here at the University of Texas Tavern and the Student Union, the noise level is going up in direct proportion to the beer sales. We've got partisans from both sides here, both Mondale and Reagan supporters, and 2 of them are on stage here with us. We have Chris Beavers, who's a Reagan supporter, and we have Amy, what's your last name, Amy?
Better.
Yeah, okay, she is a Mondale-Ferraro supporter. Your ticket didn't do too well tonight. How come?
I think it's because even the young people are concerned more with nuclear war than they are with poverty and hunger and internal issues. And they feel like the more weapons you have, the more protection you have against nuclear war, which to me seems exactly opposite. But that's the way they feel, and so they feel that they ought to vote Republican to present a stronger front.
Chris, why should a 73-year-old president have such wide appeal to young people?
Because the students of today look at the 1960s ideology, realize they don't work, and want to go to a new ideology. They're conforming to the conservative ideology, They're conforming to patriotism, they're conforming to economic stability, and they're conforming to a strong defense in order to keep peace.
As Tom Brokaw reported, Amy, about 71% of the people in your age group in the state of Texas voted for Ronald Reagan. Does that amaze you?
Yeah, it really does. But my roommate voted for Ronald Reagan. She's exactly opposite him on women's rights. She's exactly opposite him on everything except nuclear war. And she's so frightened that she's going to die in a nuclear war that she thinks we ought to have all these weapons. And that's why they're voting for him.
Thank you both very much. Well, we're live from the University of Texas Tavern. Back to you in New York, Tom.
Hook 'em horns, George Lewis at the University of Texas tonight. John, you've been looking more carefully at that national young vote, the 18 to 24-year-olds who are out there competing for jobs, making big bucks, some of them, and identifying with Ronald Reagan and what he stands for.
Well, the 18 to 24s are not quite in that group yet, and they're still for 60% for Reagan. And as you reported, I think, didn't you say that 71% of the students in Texas were...
71% of the young people altogether, which is a remarkable figure.
Well, I get 69% of the student vote in Texas for Ronald Reagan, but let me tell everybody something about that. It seems to me that patriotism is a very important component in this election. And Elizabeth Drew of The New Yorker wrote 2 sentences, which I wrote down in my book, about patriotism. She said, "It is part of our native religion that we are stronger and better than the rest of the world. Suggestions that things are more complicated than that, as there are events we cannot control, do not sit well with the national psyche." And I really think that's one of the things that's going on in the country tonight.
Yeah, I think that what we were talking about earlier, the fact that we do move politically in cycles, as we do in almost everything else. And Ronald Reagan emerged on the national political scene. A lot of people had forgotten that he's run for president before many times. He ran right after he was elected governor of California in '68, and he ran again in '72 and '76. The fact is, or in '76, not in '72, he has always done his best with his message and the kind of physical representation that he brings to the office and to the candidacy after a time of great turmoil. Because he talks about a city shining on the hill and we can be good again. And he doesn't apologize for who he is and the beliefs that he has, and he gets moist in the eye when he tells stories about America at an earlier time. And when the country's kind of exhausted and drained and the fundamental values of the country have undergone all kinds of assault within individual families and communities, along comes Ronald Reagan, looking regal, like a movie star, which he once was, representing all the symbolism of the silver screen. He says, we can be better than that.
Yeah, and let the record show, Tom, that Ronald Reagan is scoring his greatest political victory tonight at a time when he not only talked about patriotism, but politically moved closer to the center than he ever has been in his life. In this campaign, Reagan was almost a centrist. Let's get along with the Russians. We have the safety net. We're not going to cut any benefits and social programs, all of those things, and look at this bounty that he's getting tonight.
Yeah, I've been watching him a long time, since his days in California, and he always seems like ultimately a very reasonable man when he's out there talking to the voters, and it served him very well in California, in his first run for the presidency of the United States, and now in his run for re-election. We'll be back with more after this.
When IBM personal computer owners look for good software, where can they turn? To IBM for programs that help you keep up with modern times. Business programs, entertainment, productivity, education, and more. The variety you want with the quality you expect in the growing library of IBM personal computer software. A well-balanced selection at a store near you.
They call this cattle country. It's also where a lot of America's coal is. So when Sun Company built the Cordero mine here, folks worried about the future of the land. But Sun also developed this land reclamation center to make sure the land is properly restored. At Sun, we think putting our energy back into the land is just as important as getting it out.
Where there's sun, there's energy.
Like your rice checks, huh? Good, because to get 100% of a day's worth of 9 vitamins and iron, you'll have to eat 4 bowls of rice checks.
Or 1 bowl of whole wheat total.
You'll have to eat 4 bowls of Raisin Bran.
Or 1 bowl of Total.
because Total has 4 times their vitamin nutrition. 100% of a day's worth of 9 vitamins and iron. That's one bowl, 100%. But if you're still not eating Total, hope you're hungry.
We're back at NBC News election headquarters, and we have still another state, this one in the Great Plains, to add to Ronald Reagan's column tonight as our NBC News election map begins to fill in very tidily for him. We're projecting that Ronald Reagan is the winner in the state of Nebraska with its 5 electoral votes. Nebraska has voted with the Republicans in the last 4 presidential campaigns, and we color Nebraska blue tonight for Ronald Reagan and the Republicans. And the electoral college total now begins to really add up for Ronald Reagan, 344. Earlier in the campaign, his pollster, Dick Wirthlin, said he would go over 400. He may go over 500 before the evening is out. The national vote now, which is beginning to add up as well, with 13% of the precincts now reporting Ronald Reagan holding a steady 22-point lead over Walter Mondale. The ticket of Reagan and Bush over Mondale and Ferraro by 22 points. The Democrats now have lost 4 out of the last 5 presidential elections. And if you don't think that there will be some self-examination going on within the Democratic Party and a real battle royal for the next couple of years to see who controls that, well, it'll be interesting to watch. President Reagan tonight is in a hotel suite in Los Angeles, California, at the Century Plaza Hotel, which is his celebration headquarters. And a few moments ago, well, there you see the President and Mrs. Reagan. We always are given these television pictures of them in their hotel suite watching television. There's Roger Mudd on the screen on the right. This is tape provided by a pool. This is a tape provided by a pool, and then we'll hear the president being interviewed by some of the reporters who are there.
On the count is definitely totally seen so far.
Mr. President, assuming you do have a very broad and deep mandate, what are you going to do with it in your second term?
We're going to carry on the program that we started 4 years ago. Becoming sort of part of our national currency. What is your legislative agenda growth without inflation? Well, it's not so much what my legislative agenda is.
Every effort we can make to
the president is
get arms reduction.
To what extent do you think you can do something new to get the Soviets to resume negotiations?
The Soviets know now they must deal with a very strong president. And
everybody keeps asking,
in addition to that, I think you'll see some of the social issues.
What are we going to do? They're the ones who walked away from the table. What are they going to do?
Do you expect big shake-ups, sir?
The President and Mrs. Reagan watching television tonight, all of that very artfully arranged by their campaign and re-election organization. They don't miss a trick. Some pool reporters, that is, reporters who represent all the rest of the White House press, were admitted for an interview that we couldn't hear very well. Sam Donaldson asking some questions there, and Chris Wallace was in the room as well. Chris is standing by now to tell us what we were hearing. I heard the president say, everyone asks what we're going to do now, Chris, in dealing with the Soviets. Why don't they ask, what are the Soviets going to do? They keep walking away from the table. Is that a fair representation?
Yes, that's one of the things he said, Tom. The other thing he said, and it did sound somewhat garbled because what you were hearing was him talking and also the TV sets that he was listening to, is that despite all the 3 networks projecting him as a winner, that he's not ready yet to say that he's president. He wants it to be official, and I think what that means is he's waiting for Walter Mondale to concede. A couple of other interesting points. We asked him whether he expected any big shakeup in a second term, and he said not at all. He likes his team. He knows that some people who have had considerable financial sacrifice by staying 4 years in Washington will be leaving, but that he basically plans to stay with this team. He was also asked what he had to say to Walter Mondale, and he said, you know, I really can't say anything. It's terrible. I've been in races, and I know what it is to lose. He said basically that he feels sorry for Walter Mondale. We also asked Mrs. Reagan about the knock on the head that she took in the middle of the night when she tripped getting out of bed and hit her head. She said that she's feeling better and that she will come to the victory celebration later tonight at the Century Plaza Hotel. And despite what the president said, she does think that he has won this election.
Thanks. Chris Wallace in Los Angeles tonight at the hotel where President and Mrs. Reagan are watching all the television sets, and they've been hearing that he is the projected winner tonight. But the president says that he wants to wait until the final score is on the board, and as Chris suggested, he may want to hear a concession speech from Walter Mondale as well. We do want to remind you, however, that polls still remain open, especially in the western and the Pacific Northwestern states tonight, so you still have an opportunity to vote. There are many issues on the ballots and many races yet to be decided tonight. And we'll be back to talk about those and to count the winners and the losers right after this.
Let it go.
Get that feeling again. Have you driven apart? Then you don't know what you're missing. Have you driven apart? Driven apart? Have you driven apart lately?
My most embarrassing moment with my dentures? My graduation day last June. When I went up for my diploma, I sneezed. I thought I'd lost my upper plate. Then I discovered a new denture adhesive, new improved Super Polygrip.
See for yourself. New Super Polygrip has improved holding power. We improved the grip to give you more confidence.
Even when I sneeze.
New improved Super Polygrip. We improved the grip to give you more confidence.
This is the NBC News election map at this hour. The states that are colored blue are the states that we have projected Ronald Reagan the winner in. There are still polls open in the West, of course, but that is an impressive blue wave sweeping across the country from the east to the west tonight. For Ronald Wilson Reagan at age 73, our projected winner of a second term, running against Walter Fritz Mondale, a mainstream traditional Democrat who represented the best elements of his party, and yet tonight he's just simply being blown out of the country by Ronald Reagan and this re-election mandate, as the Reagan people are describing it. We'll have to wait and see whether that's the case, of course, because a mandate will depend very much on what happens in the Congress and in the Senate and what the final national vote is. Here is the national vote at this hour. 15% of the precincts are in, and that's very close to a mandate. If it stays there, that's a 22-point lead for President Reagan over Walter Mondale. 22-point lead at this hour for the president over Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro. George Bush, of course, running with the president, his chief cheerleader throughout most of this campaign, going around saying that this president deserves a second term. Roger Mudd has been toting up a lot of the returns around the country for the Senate races now. But we have 33 of them altogether, Roger, 19 Republicans, and we've had a few upsets already tonight.
Well, we had one big one. That's the one in Kentucky, and that means, I think, that we can take a look at this list and safely say that the Republicans retain control of the Senate. There are a quick list of states to go through. One is in Arkansas, where the Democratic incumbent David Pryor has been reelected. That's to his second term, and he defeated a Republican congressman who gave up his Little Rock seat, Ed Bethune. So Pryor, reelected in Arkansas. In Rhode Island, Claiborne Pell, one of the most veteran Democratic members of the Senate, reelected tonight to his, I think it's his fourth term. Claiborne Pell, the winner in Rhode Island. And in New Mexico, Republican Pete Domenici, the projected winner in New Mexico, reelected to his second term, defeating Democrat Judith Pratt. The big upset this evening, of course, was in Kentucky. That seat has belonged for the last 6 years to Walter D. Huddleston, but tonight the winner in Kentucky is a Republican, the county manager of Jefferson County, Mitch McConnell, with a big boost from Ronald Reagan, who came in and helped Mr. McConnell, helped McConnell tie Huddleston to the Walter Mondale tax increase. His election this evening makes the new Senate look like this. The Democrats 41 seats, Republicans 45 seats, and we still have 14 seats to be decided. 45 for the Republicans and 41 for the Democrats. And we'll take now a look at the closest race in the country, and that's in North Carolina. There is Jesse Helms and James Hunt. This is what the vote looks like in North Carolina. The interesting thing about the popular vote in North Carolina is that James Hunt, the Democratic governor, is getting about 90% of the black vote and about 40% of the white vote. So that leaves Governor Hunt in a fairly competitive position. Tom?
Roger, I'm watching a lot of those Jesse Helms commercials. You had the feeling that he was going to introduce himself as, I'm Jesse Ronald Reagan Helms. I mean, he tied himself so closely to this president, hoping, obviously, to get the coattail effect going for him in North Carolina. They elected a Democratic governor in North Carolina tonight, I think for only the second time in 100 years.
No, a Republican governor.
I mean, a Republican governor. I'm sorry, I meant a Republican governor. They elected a Republican governor down there, so it'll be interesting to see whether the coattail effect really does help this.
Well, those two candidates, Hunt and Helms, were, of course, such strong personalities in their own right, and there was such internal bitterness that while Reagan's good run in North Carolina has given a tilt to Helms, I don't think it's been decisive.
Yeah, a lot of Democrats had hoped that they could win the state of New York, but NBC News now is projecting that the state of New York, with its 36 big electoral votes, goes into the Ronald Reagan column tonight. We color the state of New York blue for Ronald Reagan, and so this steamroller, this wave, I'm running out of metaphors to describe what is going on tonight with this election that is sweeping across the country for Ronald Reagan and a second term for this man at age 73. Well, it is an election potentially of historic proportions, and we'll be back to cover all of it, but that's where the election stands at this time.
Good evening. I'm George Tomick with Linda Kavanaugh on this general election night,
and
1984.
What an election night
Yes,
it's turning out to be. We have some of the presidential results in from Oklahoma with approximately 21% of the vote in at this time. Let's take a look at it. Mondale has 71,000 votes, but that's not much in comparison to Ronald Reagan's 174,000 at this hour.
Checking the race for U.S. Senate, 21% of the votes in. Incumbent Senator David Bourne, a big lead over Bill Crozier, the Republican candidate. And the Libertarian candidate, Murphy, is way behind with 2,691 votes.
In the Corporation Commission, we have Democrat James Townsend facing Republican Tom Guild of Oklahoma City. The incumbent is doing well at this time with 3,000 votes. Guild has 1,800. The interesting thing is that history is on the side of the Democrats. Since 1907, only one Republican has served on the commission. The Libertarian candidate in this race is Agnes Rogier from Norman. She has 103 votes.
A lot of political eyes are looking at this one, Linda. A lot of national political eyes with about a third of the votes in so far. Frank Keating, the Republican challenger, is a slight lead over incumbent longtime state representative, or U.S. Representative Jim Jones of Tulsa by about 1,000 votes so far. And the Libertarian candidate, Neal, with 353. Second congressional district, Mike Siner, the incumbent, 11% of the votes in. He has a handy lead at this time over Rice, the Republican. District number 3, Wes Watkins from Ada has a big lead over his Republican challenger, about 16,000 votes. District number 4, Dave McCurdy from Norman with a sizable lead over Jerry Smith. The interesting thing about this was that there was some thought as to whether or not Smith could get the coattail votes from President Reagan. He hasn't done it so far. District number 4, the Libertarian candidate, has 293. The 5th district, which is basically Oklahoma City and County, incumbent Mickey Edwards, an easy leader at this time over Alan Greason. Libertarian candidate, D. Frank Robinson, has 859 votes. The 6th district, 15% of the votes in. Incumbent Glenn English has about a 4,000 vote lead over Greg Dodd, the Republican.
And when we come back, we'll be going to state Republican headquarters to the watch party, see how things are going there, and taking a look at how Oklahoma is voting county by county. Stay with us.
50,000 children are abducted by strangers in the U.S. each year. Most of these children will be abandoned, neglected, or abused. Some will be found dead. 90% of our missing children will never see their parents or classmates again. The search for these children is often stretched out over a long period of time, and funding is exhausted. Join with other Oklahomans to raise funds so the search can continue for Oklahoma's missing children. Look for Silver Fund canisters or call Oklahoma Educators Credit Union.
Sending phony love letters to some love-starved pen pal and signing my name. That's a little joke.
Gopher, we had no idea she'd come here all the way from Quebec.
I'm looking for Gopher.
We're Gopher.
Huh?
What? You? No.
Who?
Where? Her. There.
And she's what I want. I'm thinking of proposing.
Go for it.
Go out there and get her, man.
Congratulations.
Yes. That's not contagious.
I'll drink to that.
The Love Boat, Wednesday, 3:30 p.m.
Jeff Fowler is standing by at GOP Watch Party headquarters. Jeff, I imagine it's a pretty happy scene there.
There are a lot of smiles around here, George. It's interesting. A few minutes ago when you and Linda were reading the results of the Keating race and of Mickey Edwards, cheers came up. With me is Mike Brake of the Oklahoma Reagan-Bush campaign. He's a very happy man tonight. Mike, what do you make of this so far?
Well, we won Oklahoma. We won the presidency for the president.
And the people in this room are the people that did it. These are the volunteers that have been with him in 1976 and 1980 and again in 1984. And they have a right to be happy.
What do you feel like now? Do you think you're going to pick up any congressional seats? What does it look like?
Well, I noticed that Frank Keating was leading by a few hundred votes with 29% in just now. That's a little early to tell. That's the big hope in Oklahoma, of course. Nationally, I know we've won one U.S. Senate seat in Kentucky. We lost one, as expected, in Tennessee. So that's a break even. There was projections of losses of 2 or 3. Congressionally, 25-30 would give us a working majority in the Congress again with some of the conservative Democrats, and we could get back to work and help Ronald Reagan.
One quick final question. Do you feel like the vote that's coming in for Ronald Reagan tonight is a mandate?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a clear choice in this election. Liberalism, conservatism won.
A lot of happy Republicans here tonight at 50 Penn Place. It remains to be seen how many seats they may pick up in the legislature or in Congress on Ronald Reagan's coattails. We'll have more later. Reporting live from 50 Penn Place, Jeff Fowler, News 4.
Thank you, Jeff. And President Reagan is doing about as well in Oklahoma as it is across the country. President Reagan is taking the counties in blue, starting in the east, part of the state, Cherokee, Adair, Oklahoma County, Pottawatomie County, Seminole, Pontotoc, Johnson County, Bryan, in the south, Stevens County, Greer and Harmon County in the southwest, Woods and Alfalfa County in the north and northwestern part of the state. 21% of the votes in so far, and that's the way it stands right now, Linda.
Thank you very much, George. We have some new numbers in the Corporation Commission race. Let's take a look at those now if we could and show you exactly how that race is stacking up. Townsend, the incumbent at this point, has 5,200 votes. Guild, his opponent on the Democratic side, has 2,700. Now, Guild is strongly advocating splitting the agency's duties so the commission won't be responsible for regulating utilities and interstate transportation, but apparently the voters didn't think that was such a good idea. The Libertarian candidate, Agnes Regier from Norman, has 253 votes. Now, we'll, of course, be staying with this throughout the evening, updating all the folks in the races as they come in. And as we've said all along, those results are going to be slow because a lot of folks are still in line.
We'll be back at 10 till.
To make it big in the dance business takes plenty of talent and lots of hard work. Just ask Ben Vereen. On the next PM magazine, Ben will introduce us to a dancing whiz who's headed to the top.
Then you be the judge as to who's the strongest man in the world when these 2-ton titans square off in a test of strength.
You're a wimp. You're a closet case. He is a legend in his own mind, and that's as far as it goes.
Catch PM magazine at 6:30 on Channel 4, Wednesday.
The fitness fad 5 years ago became the fitness craze, and it continues even today. What's keeping so many of us addicted to physical fitness? Is it the promise of a beautiful body? Is it psychological, scientific, or is there a simple answer? I'm Dan Slocum. Join me for the News 4 Extra Hooked on Health, Thursday at 5:30 on News 4 Oklahoma.
Comprehensive election coverage on NBC and News 4. Good evening once again. I'm Tom Brokaw here with John Chancellor and Roger Mudd at the NBC News election headquarters, and the United States tonight is shaping up as Ronald Reagan country. Nearly all of the United States. As you can see the NBC News election map behind me, all those states colored in blue, Ronald Reagan the projected winner. We add 2 more to that total right now. In the West, in Colorado, with 8 electoral votes, Colorado, Ronald Reagan, the projected winner on the NBC map. That means that state goes blue as well. And in the Great Plains, the great state of South Dakota tonight, 3 electoral votes, Ronald Reagan, the projected winner in the state of South Dakota tonight, as it continues its Republican presidential election pattern of the past 4 campaigns. Ronald Reagan winning South Dakota tonight as well. The Electoral College total for Ronald Reagan at this hour, 391, just short of 400. It was a long time ago that he passed the 270 required for re-election to a second term, and NBC News has projected just that for the president. Walter Fritz Mondale with just 3 electoral votes. 18%, nearly 20% of the of the national vote of the precincts now have reported in, and a 20-point lead for President Reagan and George Bush over Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro. That's down a couple of percentage points, and so we'll be watching that very carefully throughout the evening to see if, in fact, this becomes a record or just close to it. It was a 22-point lead that Lyndon Johnson ended up with over Barry Goldwater 4 years ago. We want to show you now, pardon me, in 1964, not 4 years ago. We want to show you now what is going on in some individual states around the country in terms of the popular vote. About a fifth of the precincts have reported in Massachusetts. We have not been able to make a projection there. As you can see, Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro have an 8-point lead over President Reagan and George Bush. That is a state that the Democrats hope very much that they can add to the Mondale column. It is one of the states, of course, that went for George McGovern, the only one besides the District of Columbia in 1972. And in Illinois, where the projected winner of the NBC News count tonight is President Reagan with its 24 electoral votes, 10% of the precincts reporting in Illinois, and a 6-point lead for President Reagan there. An important Senate race still to be settled in Illinois, however. In the state of Michigan, part of the industrial Midwest with its big automobile and steel business up there, Democrats thought they had a real shot at it with its high unemployment in Michigan. But with 6% of the precincts reporting in, take a look at that, a 32-point lead for President Reagan and for George Bush. They've been having a lot of trouble raising taxes in the state of Michigan recently, and that may have benefited President Reagan. Texas now, 13% of the precincts are reporting in Texas, and as you can see, another huge lead for the Reagan-Bush ticket over the Mondale-Ferraro ticket. And George Bush, of course, calls Texas his home state these days. He moved there from Connecticut as a young man and went into the oil business. So that's where we stand with the state-by-state list at this time. One of the key players in the campaign during the course of the last 12 months or so was Jesse Jackson, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. And he's in Washington, D.C. tonight. Reverend Jackson, good evening to you, first of all. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Well, I generally hear from you very quickly, so when you didn't answer me, I wasn't sure. Let me ask you what happened in the South. I think that the Democrats were counting on Jesse Jackson and a black registration drive to serve them well, say, in South Carolina, also in the state of Mississippi. What happened there?
That formula involved a record-breaking black turnout combined with 30 to 40% of the white vote. In Alabama, for example, where Senator Heflin got 44% of the white vote, he won because the formula worked. Gore won in Tennessee because the formula worked. There is a race in North Carolina right now because we put another 200,000 blacks on the books. Across the South, the blacks are emerging as a stable backbone of the Democratic Party, and thus primarily available for a real, genuine partnership now.
Let me ask you something, Reverend Jackson, about the future of the Democratic Party. A lot of political observers and analysts, both in and out of the Democratic Party, believe that the party is going to have to heal its many divisions, that it is just a collection of special interests, the blacks and the Jews and the Union vote and the Southern vote versus the Northeastern vote and so on. How do you heal the Democratic Party after a loss of these proportions that we're going to see here tonight?
Well, you heal it with leadership that can span these various gaps. After all, in 1972, the Democrats were victims of a wipeout. About 1976, had the White House back again. I am convinced that when you look at those who have been hurt by Reagan, 8 million more people in poverty. Of that 35 million, 24 million are white. And so it's not just a matter of white and black and brown, but perceived interest. The perception was that Reagan would not raise taxes. In my judgment, in reality, he will. If his lead stands up, he's to be congratulated. We have a tremendous job to do to resist any further cuts in housing, education, health care, and job training.
Reverend Jackson, do you think that you were at all responsible for the dilemma that Walter Mondale found himself in? He was cutting deals wherever he could, and you were very tough on him in the course of both the summer and the late summer about what he could expect from you, and it made him look in the eyes of a lot of people like not a very strong leader, someone who just caved into the special interest.
Well, that's not true. The women said to him, if you do not put a woman on the ticket, then they would not support him. He put a woman on the ticket, and that remains to be seen as to whether or not the women responded to that concession, which I think was the correct decision to make. It'll be interesting to see if the Italians responded to that decision, and indeed they should have. What we must do now is look at what factors in the Democratic family did not work. The black factor worked. We must now look at the Jewish, the Hispanic, the workers, the Italians, the women, and see what's missing and, in fact, go after those people. I'm impressed, even though Reagan appears to be moving toward a wipeout in states like Tennessee and North Carolina and Alabama, that the voters are still splitting their tickets. They're saying that there are things about Reagan that appeal to them, but there are things about the Democratic Party principles that also appeal to them. And so all hope is not lost.
Thank you very much, Reverend Jackson, for being with us once again tonight. We've seen a lot of you during the course of this campaign. It's always a pleasure.
Very well.
By the way, in Texas, Ronald Reagan won 36% of the Hispanic vote in that state. That's the most that a Republican ever won in Texas. John, you've been looking at some of the figures about the black vote as well.
Well, we're going to have more on that, but what interested me very much about what Jesse Jackson said is that the Mondale people hoped that if they could get 30% or 35% of the white vote in the southern states, that with a huge black turnout, they could carry some of those states. The question that'll be searched tomorrow, and they'll be trying for answers, is did Mondale get up to 30%? And did the blacks pay off? My guess is that Mondale was the troublesome factor in some of those southern states, not the black.
Okay, there's going to be a lot to examine in the course of looking back on the returns of this election. We have a lot yet to count tonight. Polls still open in the western and the northwestern states of the United States. Many issues and races still to be settled there. We'll be back with all of that after this.
It started in 1933 with our first electric. Then came typing that looked like printing. The revolutionary Selectric. And Selectrics that correct mistakes. 1984. IBM introduces the Selectric System 2000. The Wheelwriter typewriters and the Quiet Writer typewriter. A new generation of typewriters from the company that makes the typewriters secretaries prefer most.
Anacin surprises these users of aspirin-free pain relievers.
Anacin really helped relieve the pain quickly, and I didn't get an upset stomach.
I definitely agree with you.
Anacin worked. My headache's gone. My stomach feels fine. We're all very surprised. Feel okay? And feeling good.
The Anacin formula means fast pain relief, and taken occasionally for headaches, stomach upset rarely occurs.
Anacin helped with no queasy stomach.
Anacin, fast relief, no stomach upset for millions.
That's what I liked about it.
This Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or your money back. Look, no cord. It's rechargeable. It never needs a cord because this convenient charger stand keeps it continually charged. The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or your money back. Here's why. The first screen shaves incredibly close. The second screen even closer. The Remington microscreen rechargeable shaver shaves as close as a blade or your money back. And the Lady Remington rechargeable, the perfect gift, shaves without a cord.
One of the most expensive and vitriolic Senate races, I suppose, in contemporary American politics was taking place this year in North Carolina. Roger Mudd now has some results on that for us.
It's a major story, Tom, and it tells a lot about politics in America today. The projected winner in North Carolina is Republican Jesse Helms. The Senate projected winner in North Carolina, Jesse Helms, re-elected to his third term, defeating the outgoing Democratic governor, James Hunt. Senator Helms is the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and depending on what happens later tonight in Illinois, where Charles Percy and Paul Simon are engaged in a very close race, we may have some major sea change in the Republican conduct of foreign policy, because if Percy is defeated, there is a possibility that Jesse Helms might consider taking over foreign relations. This says a lot about the state of what works in American politics today. Jesse Helms is a fundamentalist. He is not afraid to stand up and say exactly what he means. He's not afraid to offend people because of his strong views, and that's what he did. Hunt never was able to lay a glove on Helms on the issues of, for instance, on the Martin Luther King thing. Jesse Helms came out against that, and Hunt was for it, and that was a very difficult issue to overcome.
A lot of people down there who felt that Jesse Helms was simply exploiting the whole race issue throughout the entire campaign, not just on the Martin Luther King, but altogether.
Last night, when we did our little special about the election, one of the commercials we ran was the Helms commercial about where do you stand and with whom do you stand, Governor Hunt, and there were three pictures. One was Mondale, one was Gary Hart, and one was Jesse Jackson. And just the using of the picture of a black politician in conjunction with that, of course, raises that issue.
But Roger, on Capitol Hill, what about the Helms factor now? He has always been a kind of loose cannon firing from the right wing of the deck. He has his own constituency out there. He's raised a lot of money around the country. But how much real influence do you think that he can have on Reagan foreign policy, for example?
Well, he holds up nominations and successfully did so in the first part of the Reagan administration. I mean, he is, I think the Secretary of State would acknowledge privately, if we could get him in a corner somewhere, that Jesse Helms is a difficult man to deal with. And I think they're praying that Helms remains on the Agriculture Committee. There are, Tom, some other battlegrounds tonight in the Senate, and if the Democrats are going to pick up any more seats tonight, they're going to have to do it in one of 3 or 4 remaining states. Take a look at Illinois. We're talking about Percy. Let's just show you what that race looks like. In Illinois, his opponent is Paul Simon. First, we'll go to a projection. I'm sorry, is Minnesota. Well, there. Let's stay with the Illinois Senate. Charles Percy running against Paul Simon, the downstate Democrat, and that is a close race. And I would hesitate to indicate any trend at all there, except it may be slightly tilting towards Simon. Now let's take a look at Minnesota. Rudy Boschwitz. These are projected winners in Minnesota. The Republican incumbent, Rudy Boschwitz, re-elected to his 2nd term. He's defeated the Democrat Joan Grow, the Secretary of State. In Colorado, another Republican incumbent, William Armstrong, re-elected tonight to his 2nd term, defeating Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dick. And in South Dakota, Larry Pressler, Republican projected winner in South Dakota, defeating George Cunningham. Tom, George Cunningham is a very partisan Democrat, and during one of their debates, Cunningham, who used to work for George McGovern, looked Larry Pressler right in the eye and said, "You are a flash-dancing, Fred Astaire-type, blow-dried, cellophane-wrapped candidate." Larry Pressler looked at him, laughed, and went out and beat him.
Beat him pretty bad. Well, Pressler has done pretty well. He's a young senator from South Dakota. He ran for president at one time. You remember that?
He ran for about 3 or 4 days.
That's right.
So did some of the people who seem to be running this year.
Yeah, man, and he ran in place. Someone reminded me the other day that this long presidential campaign began with a question raised as to whether or not the film The Right Stuff would just absolutely catapult John Glenn into the Democratic presidential nomination.
I said that.
Remember?
I wrote a piece. I said it had a $25 million budget for advertising, that it couldn't do anything, that it was a phenomenon. The picture didn't do very well, and we know what happened to Glenn.
That was about a year ago at this time, and tonight Ronald Reagan, of course, has been re-elected President of the United States. There were other historic developments in the course of this year. One of them was that Walter Mondale picked Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman to run on a major party ticket as a vice presidential candidate. Lots of speculation about whether she hurt or helped the ticket. You've looked at the results of our poll, John.
I'm afraid to say, Tom, that the statistical evidence is that Ferraro did not help, and that means that Ferraro hurt a little bit. Let's look at one of the big figures that we got. Did Ferraro help Mondale? Now, 16% of the overall sample said yes, they were more likely to vote Democratic because she was on the ticket. But 26% said no, they were less likely. And 55% said not a factor. Now, that's the overall picture, but there is a difference between men and women when we examine the Ferraro factor. And let's look at the appeal that Ferraro had to women. 19% of those women said they were more likely to vote the Democratic ticket, but 24% told us they were less likely. So that's a net loss, even though 54% said it didn't matter to them. And men reacted more strongly against Ferraro than women did. And we can see it in this graphic. The Ferraro appeal among men, 12% of the men said yes, they'd vote Democratic more because she's on the ticket. Almost 30% said no, they were less likely to vote Democratic because there was a woman on that ticket. 56% said it didn't matter. So that while we do find differences between men and women, we also find one interesting thing in this survey, and that is that over 50%, around 55% of the people we interviewed today, over 50,000 of them, said the presence of a woman on a major party ticket did not make any difference, and it seems to me that is just the way things ought to be. They ought to be judged, these people, men or women, on their merits as a candidate and their stand on the issue.
Well, it may not have made any difference at all in this campaign, but I think that it made an enormous difference in the long reach of American political history because women broke through the barrier, so to speak, and you cannot discount that as we look forward in 4 years.
Can you imagine how many women will be going into the presidential primaries in 1988?
That's right. One of them who was seriously considered one of the final contenders on the very short list was San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein, and she's in San Francisco tonight. A place called the Washington Square Bar and Grill, a favorite watering hole for politicians and journalists alike. And Ken Bodie found himself there tonight. Ken?
Tom, I don't know how I managed to do this, but thank you very much. We're in California. The polls are still open here. It's dinner hour at the Washington Square Bar and Grill. And if the camera could pick up this button, was an earlier button this year. It was Mondale Feinstein, if you can see that. And sitting with me is the mayor of San Francisco, the object of this button, Dianne Feinstein. You just heard the report, Mayor Feinstein. What happened to the woman's vote?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Those that hypothesized a gender gap said that there were 9 million more women likely to vote. The question is, how in fact did they vote? The polls the week prior would suggest that the women voted for Mr. Reagan. And that will be analyzed. It will be cut apart 67 different ways. But I think there's one important thing. The Democratic Party took a very bold move. They made that move. It's tough duty to be a pioneer. It's very hard to be the first anything. And I think we've all got to give Geraldine Ferraro a big round of applause for a major effort and a very good performance.
You just heard it analyzed perhaps for the first time, Mayor Feinstein. John Chancellor just said there are 3 piles out there. People who said they were for Ferraro, for Mondale because of Ferraro, the smallest pile. The middle pile which said they were for Ferraro and it helped a little bit, but the big pile that said it didn't make any difference at all. Which of those piles is growing? Ferraro seems to have hurt the ticket.
Well, I think this. I think the door is now open. I think there will be women. I think people look very strongly at the woman's qualifications. I think they judge every move very differently than they do a man. I think there is a double standard applied. I think that when that the day will come when you will have a woman vice president and probably a woman president, just as you have a woman prime minister of Great Britain and you had Indira Gandhi and Golda Meir. Those women will have to get there, I think, in an traditional sense, but in a traditional sense with respect to having served in executive capacities, having demonstrated the job that's been done, and being a very clear choice based on the ability of the individual.
Well, the American voters seem to have made a pretty clear choice tonight, Mayor Feinstein. This is the biggest state. It hasn't reported yet, but around the country, it is just the fact that your party is on the mat after this election is over with. Was it Mondale? Was he the wrong candidate? Is the Democratic message completely out of step with the American voters? What is it, and what do the Democrats have to do?
Well, I think this election was really won on the basis of the president's personality, on patriotism, on the sense of leadership, on the sense of stability, which came through very clearly as a dominant choice that Americans made, that they wanted to continue the way things are going now. I think that has to be admitted. I also think that the Democratic Party has lost its hold on the middle class, and that has to be very carefully evaluated and regained if we're going to win presidential elections.
Mayor Dianne Feinstein, and I'm sorry that Mayor Feinstein wanted to say this, let me say it. The polls are still open in California, and she says she hates to think that voters were not going to go to the polls and vote on the things that are on the ballot out here, and so do we. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Ken. By the way, Rhode Island, North Carolina, and West Virginia, all states with Democratic governors before tonight, those state offices have now been turned over to Republicans. We'll be back with more on Election Night 1984 right after this.
Under this snow, there's more oil than in Saudi Arabia. 20 years ago, Sun Company developed the process to get oil from tar sands. Since then, a lot's developed around here. Jobs, a community, hockey teams. The energy's not just under the snow, it's everywhere, even on the ice. At Sun, we think that putting our energy back into a community is just as important as getting it out.
Where there's sun, there's energy.
Me really worry about denture loose spots? Why? I use new Fixodent.
Fixodent, and forget it.
denture wearers can't eat everything, but Fixodent has a hold that really makes a difference.
Fixodent, and forget it. Fixodent helps fix loose spots, and now it's improved. It works even better to hold stronger and longer with less ooze.
Not worried about these. Could I do this?
Use new improved Fixodent, and forget it.
2 more states now for President Reagan, one in the Midwest, one in the far west. In Wisconsin, 11 electoral votes. NBC News projects that Ronald Reagan is the winner in the state of Wisconsin. And in the state of Wyoming, with 3 electoral votes, once again, NBC News projects that President Reagan is the winner in Wyoming. Walter Mondale up there in Minnesota tonight must be feeling surrounded at this time. That's where the election stands at this time.
Good evening. I'm George Tomic at Linda Cavanaugh. Walter Mondale is now winning one county in Oklahoma, Cole County. But before we go to the presidential returns and other ones, we have a lot of state questions, Linda.
And in fact, it's those state questions that folks are blaming for the long lines of folks who are still at the polls. Let's look at the questions as they stand at this hour. The state question 570 would allow Oklahoma and Tulsa counties to level up to 3 mills to build and maintain county parks. At this hour, the yes votes have 9,000, the no votes being turned down by 20,000. On state question 571, this would limit claims against the state for recoverable damages for injuries resulting in death. So in other words, if you wanted to sue the state, this question regards that. Yes votes have 41% at this time, but the no votes, 58% with 17,000 votes. State question 572, the next question you'll see, would increase the amount by which school districts could become indebted. In other words, they could increase their debt from 10 to 15% of the valuation of taxable property within that district. No votes, 62%. Yes votes, 37%. Voters at this time turning thumbs down to increasing debt.
State question 573 would allow counties to levy up an additional 5 mills for construction of jails and roads, with 3% of the votes in a resounding no so far for that question. State question 574, that would allow counties, cities, and towns to issue bonds and become indebted for the financing of public utilities. Oklahomans don't want to talk about raising taxes or anything like that, Linda. 3% of the votes in, it's losing by a 2-to-1 margin. State question 575. Now, this would authorize counties to levy up to an additional 3.5 mills for indigent health care. Once again, no, 2-to-1.
A lot of these state questions dealing with money. This one does not. Deals with grand juries. It would increase the number of voter signatures necessary to call a grand jury. In other words, it'd make it harder to have grand juries. But the voters saying no at this point with 66% of the votes. Yes percent has 33%. State question 579 would authorize cities and counties to form transportation service districts. In other words, more mass trans for these folks. But the no votes again winning with 57% of the tally.
State question number 580. That would permit local school districts to levy up to 10 mills to provide incentive aid to schools. Once again, a 2-to-1 margin against with 5% of the votes in. And state question 582. That would limit the property tax exemption for schools and colleges to nonprofit schools and colleges. And it's trailing by about 10% with 5% of the votes in.
A lot of the holdup, as we've said before, people are going into the polling places and they're reading the state questions for the first time, and that's why we've got the lines where we've got them. Now, our good friend Scott Wallace is standing by live at one of the polling places. Let's go to him now.
Well, Linda, about 100 people are still waiting to vote here at Stonegate Elementary School. And here's an interesting statistic for you. Some of these voters will be casting their ballots after the polls close in California in just a very few minutes. With me now is Anna Clapper. She's Precinct 227 official. And can you tell us why it takes so long for people to vote here at Stonegate?
Well, our precinct used to stop, the northern border was 122nd Street, and they extended to 164th Street, which now includes a great many new apartments. And all of these apartment dwellers are coming down here, and it has almost doubled our precinct enrollment.
Okay, so you're having more people here to vote, and they always have a big turnout here at Stonegate. This is Scott Wallace, News 4 reporting live from Stonegate Elementary School.
Apparently, Scott's Voting Line veterans finally got a chance to vote today.
Good for them.
Back after this.
On the next Hour magazine, our month-long salute to television classics reunites Name of the Game stars Robert Stack and Gene Barry.
Whoever got the idea of putting People magazine together as a real magazine, obviously they took it from us.
Plus the fashion styles of Sophia Loren and Olympic gold medalist Mitch Gaylord on the next Hour magazine with Gary Collins. The best hour of your day.
Our Magazine, Wednesday at 11 a.m. on Channel 4.
Hi, I'm Steve Davis. The Sooners are back on the winning track after taking care of the Missouri Tigers, and now it's time to travel to the mountains to play the Colorado Buffaloes. The best way to find out what's happening with the Big Red is to talk to the man himself, Barry Switzer Show. Join me on the Barry Switzer Show right here on Channel 4. It's the best coaches show around. The only way to get the best of the OU football program is the Barry Switzer Show, Thursday evening at 7:30.
Well, there's a victory party of sorts going on in downtown Oklahoma City. Folks paid $1,000 a head. 700 of them paid that money to be there tonight. Let's go down there where Kurt Autry is there and a tough assignment. Kurt.
Linda, Nick Pack party well underway here tonight. With us now live, Oklahoma Senator Don Nichols. Senator, I understand you've received some Nick Pack money in the past. How important are those funds to conservative candidates?
Well, I think the funds may help a little bit. In my case, it was a very, very small amount. So it didn't make that much difference in the total picture, but if you look at, spreading some seeds in a lot of races, particularly races that are very close, it can make a little difference.
Senator, I'm curious as to what you predict for senatorial and congressional races.
Well, that's what's really important. The president's received a landslide election tonight. We're really excited about that, but to make some of the changes that he wants to make, we need to get some more support in the Senate and certainly in the House. My guess is in the Senate we'll probably stay about the same. In the House, I hope that we'll gain about 20, 25, 30 seats to help us put together a coalition to make some of the changes we made in 1981, 82.
Thank you, Senator. Officials here hope to raise close to $500,000 tonight. For now, I'm Kurt Autry along with Dan Slocum reporting live at the Skirvin Hotel.
Well, if you're talking about horse races in Oklahoma, you've got to be talking about District 1,
yes.
Congress, Jones versus Keating. Now, Jones is considered a powerful congressman, and this race will be watched by the nation because the Republican National Committee has targeted this race against Jones as a top priority. At this point, Jones 43,000, and Keating, you can see, very tight race.
Too close to call. Back at 22 after.
At Mathis Brothers Furniture, you can always see Oklahoma's best selection of name-brand living room furniture.
Here's two examples. First, here's a Venezia velvet sofa, like which thousands were sold across the country for $9.99. But while supplies last, you can buy this sofa for only $4.99 at Mathis Brothers.
And here's another velvet sofa made by Riverside that offers comfort, quality, and style for $3.99.
Come see these two sofas and over 90 others any night until 10 and Sundays until 7 at Mathis Brothers, 3434 West Reno.
At A1 Mobile Homes, there's only room for the best. The best housing value for the dollar, the Tiffany. The best down payment plans, the best financing terms. And A1 is now offering 9.99% financing on some pre-owned homes. I'd tell you the same thing if you were my brother. A1 has the most home for the money. Come by one of A1's 2 locations in Oklahoma City and get the best buy anywhere.
A1 is number 1.
World's Fair bankrupt. Details it.
Decision 84 election night continues. Sponsored by Sun Company. Where there's sun, there's energy. By AT&T. We're reaching out in new directions. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? Now from the NBC News Election Center in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again. I'm here with John Chancellor and Roger Munn, and we're watching a really phenomenal debate.